Well, Tim, here we are in Kansas City, Missouri, the home of the Chiefs and the Royals. And we're here today. It's my honor to be with Tommy Clack, Captain Tommy Clack, who I served with in Vietnam in 1969. And Tommy has accomplished so many things in his life since that fateful day on May 29th when he stepped on a 105 round and blew both his legs and an arm off. And that, for most people, would be the end of the story. But in Tommy's case, it was actually only the beginning of the story. And so, Tommy, I want to thank you so much for coming all the way from Georgia to be with us and allow us to do this today. And I'm just going to ask a few questions. And what we're doing is a history. I want to get a history of a little bit of your life and of your service. And I think it's imperative that we do this for future generations and, not only your immediate family, but their children and their children's children. And as I've shared with you, this is going to be a perpetual website. So we're going to have enough funds to keep this thing up for many, many, many years. So, Tommy, let me first ask you, where were you born?
Well, first of all, John, I want to say thank you for what you're doing with this. It takes a lot of effort, frustration, expenses, the whole bit to pull something like this off, and there aren't many of you in this country doing what you're doing. So to the viewing audience, they need to understand what it takes to make this happen. It also takes one individual deciding they want to make it happen. And then you're blessed to have your son Tim doing all this video audio for you in terms of making this a first-class operation. But I had the opportunity to be born in Atlanta. I was actually born at Fort McPherson, Georgia. Dad was stationed there after he came home from World War II. So I grew up on a military base, and that was my indoctrination into the world of service.
And how about your mom? Was she a housewife or what?
Mom worked like most women. She worked at Dobbins Air Force Base, which was a Bell bomber plant. They built the B-24 up there, and then the B-29. And that's what she did during World War II. They met when Dad came home and got stationed there in '46.
What was your dad's MOS in the Army?
Dad was an infantryman, but he would not survive in the military today. He never finished the 8th grade. And part of the story of our dad's generation, the Depression hit, had to go off and serve, so he went in to do what was known as the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
My dad actually was in that
Absolutely.
as well.
And that's how he earned money to send back to the family, and then went into the military, was stationed at Pearl Harbor, Schofield Barracks, when it got hit December 7th of '41. So, grew up with a World War II dad that is typical of our World War II generation.
So what did your dad do when he got out of the Army?
Well, Dad stayed in until he got injured in '53. He was injured in Korea in '53, so he had 20 years in, right at 20. When he got out, due to the lack of education, he went with a company, I still remember this, All Right Auto Park. It was the first parking garage system in downtown Atlanta. And that's where he worked my entire life with him.
It's my understanding that you come from a generational military family. In other words, there's several generations. Can you share a little bit about that?
My dad was actually 7th generation Army in our family. The first generation Clack, if you know anything about the history of Georgia, Oglethorpe came from England and landed in Savannah in 1733. The first Clack actually was wearing British redcoats. I've done the history of it. And fortunately, by the second generation, they've learned the errors of their ways. We've been fighting on the correct side ever since.
Sure.
And in fact, research is a hobby. I actually found a document in the National Archives on every firstborn male Clack is a Johnnie. I don't know what that's all about, but we're all Johnnies. And I found the second generation Clack, a document on him in the National Archives. He lost his right leg at the Battle of Cowpens, and back then our government paid him $3 a month stipend for the rest of his life for the loss of that limb. This wasn't the VA. This was the government, the newly constituted government. We're paying our wounded people to have something to live on. I thought that's unbelievable.
And then, so it just went generation after that,
It's
right down
something
to,
that I think Granddad actually got gassed at a battle called the Argonne, and eventually died from his lung issues. So
Yeah.
I never met him.
I never told you this before, but my grandfather had the same exact thing. I think he was at the same place at the same time and they
Yep,
got gassed.
yep.
And when he came home, it wasn't a very long time before he succumbed to
Exactly.
the pain and so forth, and he shot himself in the head.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And just the pain of that gassing was just excruciating their lungs and so forth.
So that was part of that generational issue,
Yep.
in terms of what they experienced.
So Tommy, when did you in your mind decide or think, I'll probably end up going in the Army?
I think it probably in the grammar school, seriously. History became a hobby, and my classmates will in high school will tell me at the reunions and those around us. When I did my history reports, they were always on battles, so we could tell where every unit was in a particular battle. I think realistically, seeing Dad in his dress blues left an awesome image in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew that's where I was going to go. And I think the reason I went off to college with the idea I was going to get a college education, but part of the reason I dropped out of college was because I was afraid I was going to miss out on Vietnam, and I needed to find out if I was half the man my dad was.
I understand, going back to your high school, that you were kind of a high school standout in sports.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but God blessed me with unique talents. I was a decathlete in track and field, those 10 events, and it was a way to compete in competition. I think is one of the reasons I'm still alive. You find ways to compete, so that was a blessing.
When did you actually? So when you joined, of course.
Yes.
And I'm not quite sure about this. Do you go to basic training if you're going to be an officer, or do you just go straight to OCS?
We were in a unique situation. My whole basic class were off OCS bound.
Oh.
And it happened a lot during Vietnam. I don't know.
So basic is basic for everybody, no matter.
Basic is basic for everybody.
Okay.
And then in AIT, I actually was at Fort Knox for armor. I was actually at Benning for infantry. I went to Gordon for communications, and then they split us all up, and that's where I got to choose artillery OCS.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think any of us ever really completed AIT. They were trying to decide where it was a numbers game.
Yeah.
That's what basically was. Where did they need people to go?
And so you came out of OCS. That was a year, right?
Say again.
OCS is a year.
No, OCS is 6 months.
Oh, 6 months.
6 months, yes.
And when you got out of there, your MOS was armor.
Armor.
Okay.
No. Artillery, excuse me.
Oh, that's right. I'm
Fort
sorry.
Sill.
Yep. Artillery. So then you continued on to Fort Sill.
Well, my first assignment, everybody that graduates from OCS, you actually have the opportunity to choose your duty station if you're in the top 10%, and I was blessed to be that.
Okay.
And I volunteered for NOM at that point, but was not allowed to go, and ended up being assigned to command. I don't know how you would command of the actual Fort Sill post. I spent the first 3 months of my second lieutenant as a staff member for the commanding general of Fort Sill.
Okay.
And then I got orders for Vietnam.
When did you learn how to crank a cannon?
In OCS. Believe it, I was never around one until OCS. That's what was really fun.
Okay. And because I know how you wound up as a forward observer. When did that particular training?
Every second lieutenant, every graduate of artillery OCS is a designated FO. Okay? Normally second lieutenant, first lieutenant. Normally at the captain level, you end up with your own battery. Okay? So that was really a unique situation in my case. I never went to AIT artillery. So when I got to Fort Sill, was my first chance to be around artillery.
So they wanted to make sure you knew the difference between north and south.
Amen.
Yeah. And how to read a topographical map.
Well, that is a big asset in terms of laying. When you go out and lay a battery, You lay it on an azimuth 0 through 360. That is the most important thing you do. In fact, Lawton, Georgia, which is Fort Sill, was known as the impact zone because a lot of second lieutenants end up in jail because they laid an azimuth that put rounds in downtown, okay, called the impact area, okay?
Wow.
You know, we laugh about it, but it happened.
And, you know, I remember just as a, you know, when I was a sergeant over there, of course I had to be, they taught me how to call in artillery and so forth too. And I just remember how so many guys couldn't read a map. You know, those Vietnam maps are all, if you found a graveyard, you found 3 feet
Yeah.
in elevation. And so,
See, back then we had to do everything with a slide rule. You know, we didn't have computers back then, so everything was done manually.
and
So
when,
you had to have a great skill of math to be
Yep.
in artillery. You know,
so tell me a little bit about your first tour in Vietnam.
my first tour, I ended up at 2 field forces. A lot of people don't know that we had a 2 field force. That's like a corps level of World War II type. But 2 field forces was, if history serves me correct, it was the 13 provinces around Saigon, basically 3 corps area. We had 4 corps in Vietnam. When I got there, Lieutenant General Bruce Palmer was the commanding general. And I ended up being liaison for all the artillery assets in 2 corps. And so I got to, all the way from the coast all the way over to the Cambodian border, that whole quarter for 3 corps. Australians, Thailands, you know, Vietnamese, American. I got to experience all the units.
Koreans, I think, were.
Koreans were south of Saigon. So all the artillery units came under his command. And like I wasn't there for Tet, but during Tet, Palmer assumed command of every unit that was in that area, and he was a 3-star. So most of your divisions are 2 stars. So he ended up directing all that. But that was the purpose of it, was to really protect Saigon. Okay?
Yeah, I remember when we'd get a chance to come in and go to the PX or go to a bar or something, there'd usually be some Aussies there, and they were always artillery. And I at the time I thought, well, how come we haven't seen any ground pounders over here? Apparently they sent artillery units. Is that correct?
Well, they did have infantry units, but primarily the Thailands and Australians were artillery units.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how tell me what you did in your first tour. Were you an FO or did
I basically, as liaison, I made sure that every artillery battery in that area, two field forces, 3 corps, was coordinated in terms of a specific. If we got into a major, let's use Ted as an example, even though I wasn't there. Each of those units had an assigned 360
Yes.
that they were responsible for, so they were always overlapping, so that no unit was ever without artillery. Okay, so the purpose of the liaison was to make sure if we had a 155 battery, let's say up on Nui Ba Dinh, the Black Virgin, where could they fire and who was not firing there? So the liaison made sure they had all of their rounds that they needed. At that time, we were coming out with a shell called Firecracker, which was the forerunner of the CBU, Cluster Bomb Unit.
Yes.
It was a 105 unit, and I had trained on that at SEAL before I left. So Palmer had me actually teaching some of the FOs in the units how to call that in based on wind. Where do you want that drop out? The sad thing about it, and you may remember this in the field, there were a lot of little round golf balls laying everywhere. That was the thing that didn't go off.
Our platoon was assigned to go out and blow them up.
Yes.
And now there were 2 kinds of artillery rounds that we dealt with. One was called a butterfly bomb, and the other was what was the other one you mentioned? There was the butterfly and the cluster.
Well,
Butterfly, is that the first one you said, the fire?
no, we called it Firefly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And,
But, those would go off above ground.
yes,
And if you were anywhere in there, you were going to get it
Exactly.
one way or the other. But yeah, when
and it was a tough round to use, and everybody did not like that round.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we also taught people how to use. You may know this, but you can take a artillery round like a 105. You can put it direct fire. You can set the fuse on 0. All artillery works on a setback. As soon as
Right.
that set back, it's armed. So when you set that fuse on 0 and it goes out, depending on where you are, it can go out 1,000 yards and explode. So we
Height of burst.
called it Killer Junior in terms of direct fire with a 105 round.
Yeah.
Okay?
So did you go to these
I was
places? Yeah, I mean,
in-
physically, you were
Yep.
visiting or coordinating with
I
these
got
people.
to see every fire base in that area.
Did you get to do a lot of chopper lifts? Did you take a
That's
lot of
where I earned
rides?
a lot of my air medal.
Okay.
Okay, was flying back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, supposedly for, God, I think it was every 25 hours,
Okay.
you got a air medal quote, or
So-
one air medal.
So you did your tour, and you went
Never
back,
got injured.
and you went back home.
Went back home to Fort Sill.
Describe what happened when you went back home.
I ended up stationed at Fort Sill as an instructor, teaching young candidates how to be an FO. And the unique thing, I think, for me at that time, and a lot of us that were rotating in and out, first of all, let me say to the crowd that's listening, I think we made a terrible mistake in Vietnam rotating. We lost experience in terms of
Absolutely.
ability to stay alive and the whole bit, but you couldn't fight it.
Another one was officers only had to be out there 6 months.
6 months.
And
okay?
that's just about the time we got them caught up on what they
Exactly.
should
And
be, should be doing.
That was a terrible mistake in terms
Yep.
of that war.
Yep.
So a lot of us that got assigned to artillery OCS, and I'm sure it's the same in infantry and everywhere else, you come out of a reality of what's real to a book setting where it ain't real. And there were several of us that got in trouble for trying to teach realism.
Well, I was just going to say, I would assume, being the kind of guy you are, you probably begged and pleaded to these guys to please listen and don't go to sleep here, because what we're trying to tell you is how to survive.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I know that's when I ended up coming back from Vietnam, and I was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I was an instructor. And I remember how it was so serious. I mean, I was so serious about I didn't want one of those guys in the
Get
bleachers to
killed or
die.
injured. Exactly.
Not one of them. And-
Unfortunately, that you and I both know in any military corporate world, you always got the guys that really take this very serious. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in OCS, there are 3 tiers of candidates. There's what they call it's sad to say this, but the lower level mentality, then the middle mentality, and the higher mentality. And you rotate through these. And I always enjoyed teaching the lower mentality guys for one simple reason: they had common sense.
And they probably listened.
And they listened.
Sure.
And they wanted to be the best.
Yep.
Okay. And it made a big difference in terms of how you send somebody off.
Sure.
So we got to see a lot of good people. In fact, I still communicate with several of the candidates that I taught
Yeah.
that have found me over the years. So that's been a blessing.
Before you went to Vietnam the first time, were you married?
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about that.
Obviously things changed dramatically.
How old were you when you got married, I guess?
That would have been 20.
Okay, so
Okay, yeah,
but you were in the service.
in the service. And,
Where did you meet
she was a colonel's daughter, okay? So she grew up in the military and
Okay.
understood that.
Yeah.
And when you and I both know, when you go off and you're a different person when you get back.
Oh,
There's
sure.
no doubt, no matter how much we think we're still in control of ourselves,
Sure.
there are a lot of things that still bother us. I think one of the things that bothered me, and I've always said this, was this rotation. I wanted to stay there and be of greater assistance.
And maybe finish something.
And finish.
I mean, right?
Exactly.
Is that, yeah.
You know?
So
So
Did you-
marriage
did you have-
at Fort Sill, in a war zone, in a setting like that, I was never at home anyways. I might
Yeah.
as well have been overseas. Okay?
And so you went, no children.
No, thank
So
God.
you went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And okay. So now let's go to your second tour. So you're teaching these guys. How did you volunteer to go back? Or did they just?
No, I volunteered to go back as soon as I got stateside. I said I want to go back, and I got back in, I think it was January of '68 at that point, and I ended up going back in October of '68.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and got assigned to the 25th, and again ended up, because of my knowledge, not tooting my horn, but because of my knowledge, I was always considered staff in terms of organization, coordination.
Would that be
liaison.
back in the battalion?
That was back at division headquarters.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
it was not out in the front lines?
No, not
Okay.
at that point.
Okay, now, had you gotten a promotion to first lieutenant at
I
that?
know, I made first lieutenant stateside
Okay,
Okay.
so now you're over there in Vietnam as a first Louis.
and didn't have to go to the field as an FO. Okay, but the 25th had no second lieutenant FOs alive or functional. They'd all rotated.
I never met one.
Okay, understood. I agree.
I mean, I'm just telling you, we
Yeah.
never met one.
So, but I volunteered to go. I ended up, I used the word utility. I ended up serving several units. Like I was with the Golden Knights with the 25th.
Mhm.
I think that was the 22nd Infantry, and then I ended up with Alpha Company and Delta Company with the 2nd of 27th before I arrived at Charlie's. I
Mhm.
went in and filled slots where there was no FO that had rotated out or had been wounded.
And your experience of an FO, was it a combination of flying around in a helicopter and dropping heat on somebody, or was it on the ground with the troops, or how? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think you learn from both ends. It's a different atmosphere in the air calling in artillery because you got to make sure that all the aircraft are out of the area so they don't get hit by an incoming. If you're smart, you don't want an artillery battery firing over troops, especially a 105 round, because it never hit the same area. Okay,
I've experienced it.
so there was a lot of things that came into play that made a difference in how effective you were. And I don't know, I think I was an effective FO. I wasn't the best at it, but I had this unique ability growing up in scouting that I always knew where I was on a map.
Yeah.
And I think that made a big difference in performance. Quote.
Yep. Well,
Okay?
I can tell you from experience, from the time the guys on the ground call for artillery, we want it right now. In other words, we're usually in a spot
Yeah,
where
exactly.
we really need it. So you didn't have a lot of time. I'm thinking.
Yes.
You had to really have this
Awareness.
played out in your mind. Yeah.
Awareness. If you're smart and you know it as a sergeant, you're gonna. If the enemy does A, you're gonna do B. So then they do C, then you're gonna do D. And I hopefully am known for always planning ahead
Yep.
as to what scenario is going to happen. But the main thing I made sure of when I was in the field is based on if we're at point A,
Mhm.
where are my assets that are
Mhm.
going to fire for me and who's going to be able to reach me the fastest. I preferred 155s to fire first. Did a lot more damage quickly and they could get rounds out a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know that later, or in '68, Sergeant Glover actually called in artillery from I think it was either the Missouri or the New Jersey, I can't remember which. Did you have conversations with?
Never.
So you didn't,
No.
they weren't
They
coordinating
weren't
with?
in that network.
Oh,
No.
okay, yeah. So, okay, so now you're, finally you get to Charlie Company, and that's
That
Coochie.
was February. Y'all had just gone through Diamond One. I was in battalion headquarters when Diamond One happened. I'm
Okay.
sitting there listening to everything you're dealing with.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. By the way, this is just an aside, we couldn't get artillery when we needed it, because there were too many other things they were committed to other places.
Yes.
Or where they were at couldn't reach us. And the 8-inchers back at Trang Bang could have reached us, but they were on a different. So I'm just telling you, from a guy on the ground, artillery was like everything to us.
But I never experienced where we didn't have artillery.
Well, I mean, we couldn't get we couldn't get a fire mission going for some reason or other.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, it took a while and Glover was the one that was coordinating. You know, he was whatever the guy is at the company level. He was the guy that was talking to him. So, and then of course we were out on the ambush patrol, and we couldn't. Once they did start firing, we couldn't
Then
get.
there has to be something in the up chain for that to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be.
Yeah.
First
but,
time I ever heard that.
but
Assets weren't available.
but we did have a Cobra pilot that came out,
Yes.
and that's the only reason that we're probably talking.
Understood.
So, okay, so when you were in Cu Chi, did you have the opportunity to go out then and deal with, because,
I went out, when I was an FO with Alpha and Delta Company, we actually called in artillery and firefights for them, okay? So we had experienced that.
and so when you came to us, we were at Jackson,
I
fire,
don't
fire,
remember where it was.
fire support
Okay.
base. You were with us for quite some
3
time.
months.
And so you were still a lieutenant, I remember.
First lieutenant.
And
I had orders from my captain. And what I don't think you and others know is that on June, I still have the order. On June 3rd, I was to report to Tane in to take over a 155 battery as battery commander.
wow.
And I couldn't get out of it.
Yep,
I tried
yep.
to get out of that.
Well, I got a question for you. We didn't see very many officers out with us from back in the rear. Why did you want to hang with us?
Because I personally believe it is where it's at, and I am not a pencil pusher. And I'm a big believer. I don't think I was ever afraid to die. Okay, I think God is control, and if you're good at what you do, and I'm not being egotistical by saying if you're good at what you do and you know you can perform, you know you're going to get the job done. But when you're with a group of people like we were, it was the ultimate. I mean, I would pick that over a desk job anytime.
But another thing that confused us is you could have been back in Coochie eating steak every night. And instead, you were opening sea ration cans with us or getting Mermite cans with half-cold meals.
That's the way Dad raised me, though.
I mean,
The one thing that I would pass on, as I passed on to Adam and everybody else, is as a leader, you don't get something that your man can't have. Even
Yeah.
if you're like president of a memorial, everybody wants to give you a free dinner or something. If your board can't have a free dinner, you better not partake of that.
Yeah.
Okay?
And so that was
I never
just,
thought of it that way. I didn't see it that way. That was my job to be there.
yeah. I mean, and you know as well as I do, because you hung around officers, you knew that wasn't the way it was.
Understood?
If they had an opportunity to be in the rear,
A lot of ticket pushers, but
Yep.
that's the difference between being a professional and a careers. A
Mhm.
careers is going to do that, check in at 8, check out at 5, and I'm a professional and you're a professional. You're going to be there before and you're going to stay after,
Yep,
okay?
that's
You're going
true.
to do what you got to get it done.
And do you remember up to this point what awards you'd been given up to the time that you were with us at Jackson?
Awards, standard Army commendations, Air Medal, basic stuff.
Did they give Bronze Stars to FOs?
Only if, well, I don't know, tell you the truth.
I mean,
I didn't get one.
okay.
No.
And I have to ask you, because every time I talk to somebody that was in a helicopter, like you were, did you ever have a cowboy pilot that kind of banked it over and said, take a couple of shots down there?
We all did.
That's what I always hear.
Absolutely.
So you got some
Shoot time, trigger time.
You got some shooting in as
Yep.
well. Well, good.
Yep.
There's one thing that I'll never forget, and I've shared this with you. You know, when I say you hung out with us, I've got pictures of you actually eating with us and hanging out with us. And we used to, it wasn't like you were an officer. I mean, we respected the fact that you were an officer, but we just didn't talk like you were, we just teased each other and we were all in the conversation and you were in the and, Ide was the same way and Wunderlich was the same way. I mean, we just had some officers that were just great
But if
guys.
you care about the people you're with, you're not going to segregate yourself from them.
Yeah.
And
I have a picture of you and Joel Baker, Lieutenant Baker. He came in and took over our platoon right after Diamond won. And he came into Trang Bang when we were back there licking our wounds. And I have a picture of you guys in your hooch. We'll call it a hooch for lack of a better term, kind of screened deal. And I remember on several occasions, somehow or another, somebody caught wind that you had an 8x10 photo of a gorgeous bombshell in I'm going to call it a parlor picture, which was very common in those days, where it wasn't anything, it wasn't even risque, but it was kind of a relaxed, laying back.
Understood.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when we found that out, we used to come in there and we used to tease you about that. And we thought we were going to get your goat, but we didn't.
I don't remember that, to tell you the truth.
And you would show us that picture. And I remember we would say, how in the world
Did I end up with that?
can such an ugly old toad
It was his mother. I'm sorry.
That was a colonel's daughter. Colonels have good-looking daughters.
and you know, and
Yeah.
everybody just went, man, jealous. You know, I mean, that guy.
I don't remember that. That's cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
it's true. And so now I want to go to May 25th because we were in Jackson and there was what was the name of that village where
Right next door, I think, was Apduck. Yep.
Apduck.
Yep.
And so they told us that there was a mission they were going to send our platoon in there, and we were supposed to sweep the outside and go right into the village because they had suspected that there was some VC and some NBA in there. And so it was just like another day. We got up in the morning and had chow and saddled up, and on the 25th, the helicopters did take us out of the fire support base. It wasn't a very long flight, and they dumped us off, and then we proceeded to go in through a very highly vegetated area. And as we started to go in, remember the little booby trap signs? They were all over the place for the kids. You know,
Yeah.
they put them there so the Vietnamese children wouldn't go off the trail there.
Yeah.
And immediately, and I told Sergeant Marquez, I said, this place, we're walking into a mess here. You sure this is what we want to do? And he goes, Marquez was total Army. He said, that's our mission. That's what we're going to do. You know, not that he didn't care for our safety, but it was, we're going to do this. And so we got about in the middle of this vegetated area, and we were going down this trail, and that's when Matias Herrera stepped on the 105 in front of me. And Clennon stepped on one, he got killed. Lieutenant Ide got killed, and so forth. Helicopters, one of the scariest moments of my life, too, in the whole time I was in Vietnam, is when I had to take a stretcher and take Herrera out to the helicopter while the helicopter blades are going, because I know that booby traps will go off by the wind of the deal. And then all the 105 rounds that were apparently, we were in a minefield.
Yep.
And so I thought, this is it. We got the wounded and the casualties on board, and they took off. And Sergeant Marquez said, everybody stay right where you're at, nobody move, turn around, we're going to walk out the same identical way we came in, which we did. Now, when we got back to the fire support base, it was one of the most depressing, nobody spoke, guys were sick about what had happened. And the word came down that battalion wasn't happy about what happened either. In a way that, battalion would, they don't like that. When we get officers killed and we get taken advantage of like that. And so I think, I can't prove it, but I think they decided at that point, well, we're going to send them back in there and we're going to kick ass and take some names. And so in order to do that, we're going to have a top-notch forward observer with these guys so that when the shooting starts, they'll put that stuff right on them. And that's how you came on the 29th. They sent us back out there, except on the opposite side of the village. And there was a couple of tanks, and they put us on line, and the tanks were in front, and they were going through the area, and they had flamethrowers on them. I'll never forget it. And so then we went a little way, and then they opened up on us. And it was a hell of a firefight. I mean, it lasted a pretty good time.
Yep.
Until the tanks moved forward, and all it took was a couple of blasts, and the shooting quieted down in a quick hurry. And so then they said, okay, we're going to stay here for a little while, so grab a C ration. And I remember, just like it was yesterday, we're in line, You can see everybody, and you were to my right, and Jimmy Langley, your RTO was there. I was here. My buddy Ray was next to me, and we just took a knee and we opened up a sea ration can because we were going to be there probably just 10 minutes. And so then they said, hat up, we're going to keep going. And of course, nobody wanted to go in there because we knew what was in there. And so when they started up, the tanks started to move forward and the line started to move forward. And it was about 30 seconds after we moved, and right to my right, there was a huge explosion. And I looked over, and it was just so dusty you couldn't see. And all I saw was Jimmy Langley about 15 feet behind where you were, and he was laying on his back. And of course, you can't see the fumes of the explosive, the cordite. I mean, it's just something that you never forget as long as you live. And when the dust settled, of course, I kind of put two and two together because I'd just been through that movie before, a couple of days before. And so I just rushed over there as quickly as I could, and you were laying in the crater that was what the 105 made. And I remember you were black. All I could see is the whites of your eyes, and one of your eyes looked like it was bugged out, or
Right one was, yep.
And I thought, first of all, how can he be alive? I mean, honestly, I did. And there was no bleeding. There was no severe squirting like you would think from femoral arteries. And of course, I knew why, because Matias Herrera, the same thing. The heat of the metal cauterized all those blood vessels.
Yep.
Thank God. And one of your arms was gone, and you kept saying to me, "Can you get me off my arm?"
Yep.
I'm laying on my
I
arm.
remember that.
So you were saying to me, "Can you please get me off my arm? It's burning." And of course, I said nothing because what am I going to say? What arm? Right?
Yep.
And I still couldn't believe you were talking. I mean, it just blew me away. So basically, what we did is before Doc got there, I started to put tourniquets on the stumps and so forth, and then you didn't talk anymore. That after I started doing that, your eyes were open, but you weren't talking, or you weren't responding. And then the helicopter come. We didn't even use a stretcher. We just took one of our ponchos and put you in that and took you to the helicopter. So let me ask you, from what memory, I don't even know if you have any memories. Do you remember the day? Do you remember the day we were there?
What is really unique about that whole situation is prior to you and I and the reunion happening, it's almost like somebody closed the door and locked it, and everything prior to May 29 was gone except for May 25 and Ide.
Yeah.
Ide and I had shared breakfast that morning, and we both love hunting and fishing, and I think that's why he and I clicked.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both outdoor type people. And you're right, when y'all came back in and we found out the casualties, there was that unit was not an effective fighting unit that day at all. I mean, thank God nobody hit us that night or that afternoon.
Yep.
Okay, so, but leading up to that, I don't have a lot of memory, and the only picture I've got in my mind of May 29 is I remember standing up, and I can see it right now. I stood up, and I remember taking a step, and then everything's gone, okay? And I do remember asking somebody, obviously you, to move my right arm.
Yeah.
And I could see people moving around, but I couldn't see people. You were blurred.
Yep.
Vision was not that great.
Yep.
And then the next thing I remember, I'm on the helicopter, and I had what we call a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience. I'm actually out of my body, looking at me laying there, and the medic on that helicopter covered me up with a poncho, and I remember him saying, "He's gone."
Mm.
And we go back to the 12th of Act. I'm watching all this. I watched them take me off. It's like my feet are here and my head is there. I'm up here looking down, and I can still see that very vividly now. And that's how I was positioned the whole time, and laid out there with the rest of the casualties. And I actually went back to the battlefield, left my body and went back to the battlefield and saw all the carnage of what had happened with that particular day. And it was amped up because I looked
Yeah.
up on a map. And I actually still remember this going in whatever form or shape I was. Don't know how to explain this to anybody. I actually went around the battlefield like a sphere moving around, seeing all this. And my medical records show that I was out for 7 days. I was unconscious for 7 days. And I still remember where I was a beautiful, serene, good feeling. People that I knew were dead were there. They weren't this physical form. And this bright light. And apparently on day 7, as the medical records show, I still remember being in front of this great figure, and it may be my Christian upbringing, but it was God with a bright mist around him, and he put his finger out and he touched me, and he said, "It's not your time," and that's when I woke up in 12th of Act in Coochie. Okay, so I lived one of those experiences, and I was able to tell Dr. Meggs, my doctor, and Nancy Overstreet, my nurse, what they had done to me over those 7 days, because I had seen it the whole time they were doing all this. So we lived through it while they were doing this. I watched them cut my uniform off. Okay?
But you were DOA on the helicopter, so then you couldn't have remembered being taken into.
But I'm watching it.
So if you're dead, what did they do with you?
I was laid out on this pile, and for some reason, Dr. Meggs came out of that mass unit, or at the 12th of Act, and he's dead now, but we communicated. I found him, got in 84, and he actually shared with me, he doesn't know why he walked over and picked that poncho up, and here I am. He saw something, and they took me.
He probably saw your eyes.
Well,
or something.
I have no idea. But I actually watched him do that. I was able to tell Nancy Overstreet everything she did for me for 7 days while I was unconscious.
I bet. How did that affect them?
It affected all of them, really. But it wasn't the first time Meggs or them had experienced it. Apparently, it happens regularly.
Wow.
Okay? In fact, I have, not tooted my horn, I've been the subject of several books about near-death experience. You may remember in the 80s, Leonard Nimoy, Spock, did a show called In Search Of. And my case is one of the more documented, since I was able to tell them everything that happened. Very documented, and the only way to know that was to have lived what I said I just lived.
Did you ever find the nurse?
I did. Nancy Overstreet. She lives in Redondo Beach, California.
Oh my!
I actually went out and visited her in '91.
I bet she was just.
She doesn't want anything to do with me.
I bet she was just amazed.
It reminds her too much of that.
Oh, I can imagine.
That's reality.
Yeah.
But I actually got to go back to San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston, the 12th of Act. I've been to 2 of their reunions to say thank you to that whole, I call it mass unit, 12th of Act.
Yes, of course. So you were in Coochie for 7 days?
I was actually there for 2 weeks.
Okay, and the trauma, obviously the bad hurt guys, really bad hurt guys, right? And so then I bet they were probably thinking, well, we don't know if we're going to be able to keep him breathing or not.
Well, my records, I actually have all my medical records from day one. They actually have notes in there, not expected to be here in the morning, quote, 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 Then I went to the 106 in Japan for 3 weeks, and then to Okinawa, to Alaska.
What were they doing in?
They're just triaging me. I'm having more and more surgeries. As I keep going, they keep repairing stuff, okay?
First thing, stop the bleeding.
Stop the bleeding a whole bit.
And just keep going.
I have multiple skin grafts where they're taking skin to cover these things up, So I ended up at Fort Gordon.
Is that one of the first things they do? Is graft over the open?
No, first of all, they have to make sure, they have to make sure that there's no infection.
Yeah.
This right here, if you see this scar runs right through here. This was all open for almost 3 months. There was an infection inside, and I actually had a condition called pulmonary effusion. I still remember that word. My artery had been shattered, the pulmonary artery, and it was draining out into my lung. I had IVs coming in and IVs going out. That's why they didn't think I was going to make it. So actually go in through here with a dangum 25 gauge needle. I still remember 25 gauge, that's a big mother, and suck this stuff out, okay? And there was an infection over here. This was open. There's a scar right there. I don't know if you can see that scar. That was part of the open area here. Somehow or another, something had gotten open. And then its eye, I didn't have eyesight in the right eye for several months. Now I got good eyesight. You know, God was good,
Yes.
okay?
So Japan and then
Well, Japan, Okinawa,
Okinawa.
Alaska, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Fort Gordon, Augusta, Atlanta, VA. From May 29 of 69 to September 19 of 69 was when I arrived at the VA. So the rest of that was military hospital.
That's 4 months?
Yeah, almost September, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was always in it's amazing how the Army thinks. I was always on Ward D for death. Because every time we woke up, somebody on the right or left or across was dead during the night.
Do you remember how you felt about that? What the gut feeling was when you knew where you were and what was happening around you?
I honestly think, and based on the people I have found that helped me get through all that, apparently I've had a positive attitude from day one, and I think that's my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you know, I don't know how to explain that. It's God, this is God working. I mean, I share with people, this left leg is off right at the top of the knee. If you stuck your leg out and put a lever straight down, if that was 2 inches shorter, I couldn't do what I do in life. Okay, it allows me to transfer the toilet to my driver's seat to the bed. I can stand on it and get up, you know, and no paralysis.
Wow.
I mean, God was good to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
he apparently knew what you had to have.
I think, realistically, I believe that sincerely. And I can honestly say I've never thought about suicide. I've never thought about copping out. Necessity is the mother of invention. In the VA jargon, the VA system, I know from VA, based on all the other triples, I am considered the worst triple. All the other guys have got part of an appendage.
Stumps.
Okay, but this whole shoulder joint is gone. So it's a great life because everywhere I go, I get to teach somebody. Okay, I mean, seriously, I think of it that way in terms of how do we do what we got to do. I share with you an example of how there's no common sense. I had a stress test in 15, so 3 years ago. And we go into the VA, and they want to do the stress test, and they normally put you on the treadmill. Well, I can't do the treadmill. So they decide they're going to do me with injections to get my heart rate up. And this resident is looking, I used to be 6'3" and 200. And he looks at the chart and says, well, I'm going to give you this much of this fluid. I said, sir, I'm not 6'3". I don't weigh 200. I think we need to
let's not give me a heart attack here.
Let's not do this. And he said, nah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Well, my records show that I died there. Okay, and they had to pump me back up.
They gave you a heart attack.
Gave me a heart attack. Okay, and there was a very valuable learning experience, but no common sense.
Wow.
So it's always a teaching process.
When were you conscious? At what point in that journey between Vietnam and Atlanta were you were awake, you were conscious?
Well, from day 7 on.
Oh, okay, so you knew what was going on. So
in fact, I got a lieutenant I arrived with in Vietnam, and his name is Norman Arbogast. He's out of Illinois. We still communicate. We arrived in country together, and he went through the induction process, and he ended up with the 4th Division. But he got wounded and came by. He actually has pictures of me laying in the bed in Cu Chi. Okay, and we still stayed friends. So he made it out alive. But you know, that's the first recollection I have, and I can't remember who I got him. I can't remember the colonel's name. I actually have a letter from the 20. Who was the 27th colonel? Do you remember at that time? May of '69. I don't remember that now for some reason. Anyways, I have a letter from him.
I probably have it on some orders.
I have a letter from him that he delivered to the hospital while I was there, Cu Chi, thanking me for my service.
My, oh my.
Okay, and I kept that letter for some reason. It's the only thing that come out of Vietnam with me. The unfortunate part of people like me in war, none of our stuff in Vietnam made it home with us. Everything I owned disappeared.
Yep.
All my pictures, artifacts I had collected.
I know.
Memorabilia, the whole bit. Nothing's there.
Yep. So you were married.
Correct.
Okay, so when you hit Atlanta, I'm assuming
I
all your
never saw-
relatives came to wish you.
Augusta, Fort Gordon, they came.
Fort Gordon.
That's right across from Atlanta.
Okay, and it was a happy
Well,
rejoining your wife.
Mom made a comment that was my mom. Mom looked at everybody around me and looked at me and said, "If there's nothing wrong with your brain, I know you can make it."
Wise.
And that's all she said.
Yep.
Okay. And Dad looked at me and said, "Welcome home." That's my dad, stoic World War II. Never told me he loved me his whole life. But it was a good scene.
Yep. And
Okay.
that gave you another boost. Yep. And how about your wife?
Never saw her from the time I left in October of '68. Haven't seen her since. She never showed up at Gordon. Never came to the VA. And when I got to the VA, I had a lawyer show up in October with divorce papers.
That was it.
And back then, you could do that.
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay.
sure.
And that honestly,
Was it not a surprise?
no, it was not a surprise.
Yep.
I think anybody that was in that wartime married understands that's a simple reality.
What was her name again?
Peggy,
Peggy. What
Yep.
did she end up doing?
I have no idea. Honest to God,
I mean, did
I-
she?
never looked into it.
Okay, so
Nope.
you never communicated with her again. Okay, and so then,
Still communicate with her dad. That's what's
no,
really funny.
no kidding.
Yeah, he calls to see if I'm doing okay. Every once in a while, she never comes up, so we just leave it at that.
Tell us a little bit about Adam.
Adam ended up ninth generation Army in my family. He wanted to be a Ranger his whole life, and I saw that with the military bases and the trades and everything we do with life. And when he actually made that decision very early in life, and in fact, before he graduated from high school, he had already signed up for the pre-indoctrination, or I don't know what they call it now. You go through physical fitness before you can get sworn in. But the day he graduated, he was sworn in the next day, and here we go.
Off and running.
So
And what was his Army career like?
he was one of our Rangers and ended up with 9 tours over there, 4 in Iraq and 5 in Afghanistan. So they were gone every 4 months and home 8. That's how they rotated with the 3. But there's 3 battalions.
And
of
he was a
Rangers.
single man at that time.
Single man at that time. Yes. So, and now he's out, and let's just say one of our agencies that uses those skills is making use of his skills still over there. Okay.
Mhm. Now, were you concerned about him, what he might be going through when he came home after so much action?
I watched him every time he came home to make sure that certain signs. I will say this to his credit and his mentality and those like him. As Adam would say, "Dad, I'm home. I'm not in a war zone. I flipped the switch off. I'm your son. I'm not a warrior." And that's how they approached it.
He verbalized that.
Verbalized that.
Okay.
And all of them have done that. I've had quite a few of his teammates with us. They're all well adjusted.
Yep. Can you imagine the camaraderie with that group?
Well, he had something you and I didn't have. He served with the same guys
That's
for
true.
12 years. Okay.
Unbelievable.
I mean, and they're still all friends.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
It's just, it blows your mind. That's the way it should be.
Yep. How
But as
about
an enlisted man, he was asked to go to OCS, and he always said, "Dad, that's great, but I can get more done as a sergeant." And I
yeah,
don't
he
need
wouldn't
it."
be doing what he wants to do
No,
if he was an OCS for
No.
sure. Tell us about Aaron.
Erin, my daughter, is 30. I raised both my kids to be very independent. They both could survive on their own if they had to. She started her own business when she was 14, photography, so 16 years now it's been growing. Got 4 of my grandkids, married to the same man, good Christian family, and I'm blessed and honored.
Yeah, you can't ask for more than that.
Nope.
So what was your first occupation after you came home and I guess when you got out of
My first job, while I was still in the VA, I traveled America as a speaker on behalf of the Department of Defense.
Really?
Yes, I was chosen to speak about supporting our military, not the war, but supporting our men and women and try to get away from aid and comfort to the enemy with all the crap that was going on
Yep.
in America. I can
Yep.
remember being on campuses being hit with water balloons and eggs because they didn't agree with my viewpoint. And that was part of America at that time.
Did you learn to duck pretty good?
All of us. Yeah,
Oh, God.
absolutely. But that was a good learning experience.
What did you do after that?
I finished my college degree at Georgia State, and while I was still there, God has blessed me, and that I've been traveling as a public speaker since '71 around America, and I've been in all 50 states, multiple foreign countries, met a lot of great people. I get to be around the truly great Americans in this country in terms of people that think just like we think.
At some point, you became a service officer.
Well, my whole career, while I was doing all this, I served Senator Sam Nunn out of Georgia was chairman of the National Defense
Right.
Committee, and through him, I got involved with I ended up being liaison with the VA. So I actually really became what you call a service officer in '79. Would have been '79 while I was at that point what was called I was administrative assistant to the head of the Atlanta VA, and like his staff assistant. And my job was to make sure that veterans that had an issue with the Atlanta VA got it resolved. So we learned how
Like not having enough parking spaces for
that
vans?
all the time. Okay, or doctors not showing up, or certain things been happening, and then in '91. The head of the Georgia Veterans Department asked me if I'd come over and become one of his field managers, which is what I did till 2012. So I had 7 counties on the east side of Atlanta that we were the service officer for.
How many veterans did you serve over all those years?
Believe it or not, I have a record of that. Literally over 60,000 over those years. Okay, so. My goal was to maximize their benefits. VA's in the business of finding a way to say no. We can always find a yes. VA wants to minimize. We always got to maximize.
So
Okay.
did you do like continuing education so that you could learn more about how the VA worked and how you could actually get through these knots and things that held veterans
if you
back?
want to be good at what you are, you always are educating yourself. You stay on top of everything. And just because the law says A, there may be a word in there that says we can go B, C, and D and not break the law. So
Yeah.
you find a way to make it happen. So you stay on top of what's going on. And I'm blessed now that through all of this career professional involvement, I still get to serve Georgia's representatives and senators in terms of input for veterans issues. Now the VA doesn't care for me, but that's their problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so you retired
In
from
2012,
30
I would say I retired from gainful employment.
38 years?
47 years.
Oh my gosh.
47 years of government and military and government work. Yeah.
And so then what does retirement look like for you?
Faster pace, more hours, more involvement, more expensive. Okay, still on the road, still help veterans and their families when they need help.
And now it's Senator Isaacson is kind of your contact point in the state now, right? I mean, he's on
He's a go-to guy for the
is he
VA.
on the veterans?
He's chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee.
Right.
That
So
doesn't mean we can always get everything done, but we try our best to keep him informed of what's boots on the ground saying.
Yep. And so now you're on a committee, President's Committee for Veterans Affairs, and you don't have to say things that are confidential, but what does that look like to actually have the president's ear?
Well, I don't know if we have the president's ear or not, based on the chain of command, but my whole intent of accepting that and staying there is to try to get reality booked and move forward on. There are certain things that Congress has no idea of reality. And my main purpose is making sure, I use the word boots on the ground, those of us that deal with the VA and know what's going on, that we have that real input. And there's certain things that the nation as a whole needs to do for all of our veterans, like the recent Caregiver Act. It needed to be extended to every veteran, and it is now. So
The what?
the Caregiver Act, effective October 1. Yeah, the young generation family members are paid to provide care. Now all of our generations have got that. So,
and one thing that I'm still confused about is the president says, and the governor of my state says, and John Tester says, all vets now have choice.
that's a joke.
But in reality, that we have no choice.
No.
So why are they saying that if it's not the truth?
It looks good, okay?
But nobody's got choice.
There are some states that are more advanced than Montana and Georgia in terms of that being a reality, and they're all up in the Northeast, okay? And they have fewer veterans up there than we do down here.
Did they sign a bill that says it's there, but
No.
they're not using it? Or?
No, I think the reality is the knowledge of how, first of all, the private medical field has not bought into this 100%. That's part of the issue. Until we get the medical all of America bought into it, it's not going to be reality. One of my goals from day one, 1970 to now, is I think you and I, combat guys, we should be given a card to go where we want, when we want. Just like Australia, England, Germany, France, all of them do that for their veterans. If you serve, you go where you want. Have the VA pick it up.
Yep.
The VA is a bureaucracy. I don't know if you saw it, but they just went to a $197 billion budget on October 1.
I didn't see it.
Wow. Where's all that money going? I mean, we ain't seeing it on the ground.
And we thought that they were going to clean up the management and so forth.
Management is being cleaned up. It's just going to take a while to get rid of certain levels, and that's systematically being done. I think in Mr. Trump's defense, he's done a lot since he's been there. You have to understand this has been going on since '33, when the VA was created.
That's true.
So it's hurry up and wait.
So one day you woke up and you got out of bed and you said, I think there needs to be a Walk of Heroes in Georgia. Tell me about that.
Well, the Walk of Heroes is hopefully going to end up being one of the more educational opportunities for understanding the cost of freedom. And basically we're centered on January 1 of 1900 through the current date. So we've expanded to encompass the global war on terror. But the idea is to provide a walking educational opportunity in a 1/3 mile loop throughout this complex, where there's the war front, the home front, and then World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, and the global war on terror, so that you can have an opportunity to look up all the KIAs from your state or any state, the cost of wounded in action, and all the other data, stories like you're doing here. I won't see it completed. There's just.
But tell me, how does one man go out and get something like this started?
I think any of us that come up with an idea can surround himself with people that do stuff that he or she can't do, and as a team you make it happen.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a leader. I don't have a problem leading, but I try to lead from the front and do more than my board combined, so that we are always on the same track. But it's out in society. Look at there's 28 national memorials being built. I mean, and in Georgia, around Metro Atlanta, we've got 42 memorials being built. So everybody's after the same scarce penny. Okay, but you do all that you can with what you got. Okay.
Well, I've got to tell you, it's, you know, and of course your Wolfhound brothers have participated in that, and
Yes.
we have our curb or our blacks or what do we call them?
Pavers.
Pavers, yeah, and
Yeah, we have a section listing all the KAs that died under your watch.
yeah, and what a wonderful thing, you know, for those men. And kind of to wind it up, I've got a couple of questions that I think people could really learn from. What does the flag mean to you? What is the American flag? What does that really mean to you?
I think it is the focal point of the most unique, exceptional experiment, and it's still an experiment in being a free people. We are still growing. Thankfully, our founding fathers were so smart that they drafted a U.S. Constitution that is written in stone. It doesn't change with the eons of generations. But I also share with people that flag represents everything that's good about mankind on this earth. We are, if it wasn't so, why does the rest of the world want to come to us legally and illegally? I mean, we've got something that the rest of the world wants. That's why we have immigration. Every country has X number of people that can come to this country, so the rest of them are illegal.
Yeah.
But I think everybody, when they see the stars and bars and those stripes, it symbolizes an opportunity to excel. If you want to be the best you want to be, you can go do it. It represents, to me, God knew what he was doing when he created America. I think he specifically helped this country become a reality. And that's the saving grace of this world. Okay? So it's everything and anything that you think about in terms of what you want to be as a human being and God-fearing Christian free enterprise. I mean, my God, if you want to be a bum and live under a bridge, you can go do that. I mean, you want to tear your country down verbally, you can go do that. That's what it represents. And you and I and everybody like us is willing to serve to give all those people the opportunity to disagree with us. That's what they don't understand.
So when you see large groups of people deliberately disrespecting the flag, A, what do you think causes that? And B, is there anything that can be done about it to make it so it's not like that?
Well, first of all, the reason I think they target the flag, it is the symbol of all we just talked about.
Yes.
So you attack the symbol. And I think when these young people, or whoever they are, decide they want to burn the flag, they think they're making a statement. They're just showing their stupidity. One day they're going to grow up and have to pay taxes and have kids, and their whole attitude is going to change. How do we stop it? We confront them, and I am not tooting my own horn. I've actually been knocked out of this chair twice over the decades, stopping a group from burning the flag. Okay, I think it's still worth dying for. What I share with everybody watching this is we military people took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of America. We were never relieved of that oath.
That's right.
Okay, we still have an obligation to protect.
Yep.
But there's an opportunity to share with them if they want to find out reality is come and listen to our viewpoint. Why are you so centered on your viewpoint when you don't know the other side? The sad part about it is that side can't handle the truth.
True.
We've always got truth on our side. So we're always going to win if we just stay the course.
Tommy, what's the definition of a hero to you?
A definition of a hero is somebody that gives more than they take and is willing to sacrifice all that they have in life to ensure others have. If that means giving up their life so that somebody lives, that's what we normally think of as a hero. But you got anybody in society, you don't have to be in the military to be a hero. You know, you can go run into a building with a fire and bring somebody out and save their life. You put your life on the line and potentially could die to save that person or whatever. You know, we got a lot of heroes we don't think about.
Yep. I once read something that you wrote, and it was about heroes. And you said at that time that you wrote this, that a hero was someone that gave all, put it all out there, left it all on the field. And you know, I got to thinking about that. And you, in that same article that you wrote, you said you were not a hero.
Negative.
You are
Exactly.
not a hero, never expected to be or whatever. And I just want to tell you that for a fact, you've given 99 and 9/10% of all that you have. You beat all odds to be here today. And I can guarantee you that the men who served with you and the men that you have served all feel that you're a hero. So I'm going against your definition, but that's what I believe, and that's what the guys that served with you and those guys that you served think. So with that, I want you to end this with any statement or anything that you want. If I've left something out that's important for you to have generations to come see, it's all yours.
Well, I think what anybody watching this now and in the future needs to understand that without this kind of endeavor by Big John to make this a reality, history gets lost. And every one of us, whether we served or not, has a history that needs to be recorded and passed on to future generations so we can learn the reality and the truth and learn from our mistakes. If we don't do that, we're going to commit them over and over and over. So there are many individuals out there that may be watching this in the near future. I encourage you and your family, if you've got somebody that served this country, get their history recorded. Find a way to make it happen. You can go on the internet, for example, with National Archives and pull up Veterans History Project and print out a form that you can send to the National Archives in D.C. free of charge, like what Big John is doing with this, and it's recorded for life. And we need to do that and pass it on. Thankfully, we've got people in society like Big John who sacrificed their time and energy along with his family, particularly his son Tim, that get these things done. Going to make a better America when people have an opportunity to see all of this collectively. So thank you, Big John.
And Tommy,
for getting this done.
I just want to tell you what an honor it is, to even have found you. I've learned so much and I've grown. I'm a better person,
All of us are.
because I found you. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming to Kansas City to spend that time with us.
We thank you for this opportunity.